am Adrienne Burke, Principal Planner with Miami-Dade County's Office of Historic Preservation. How can we in preservation respond to climate change? We're going to have to be flexible and do preservation in ways we've never done it before. Be willing to be open-minded, get rid of some old rules perhaps, things we're used to, and be willing to see a new preservation for a new time. And hopefully with some of the systemic impacts of racism and inequity that we've seen, the time is now.
Hi, my name's Manuel Ochoa. As we think about climate change, let's consider commercial districts and main streets in communities of color where climate change will have its biggest impacts. Many of these buildings are not iconic, but these buildings are assets to their community and local business owners. So let's work to ensure these places don't get overlooked so that we can patronize diverse businesses and celebrate authentic communities in years to come.
Hello, I'm Dr. Leslie Keys, the Director of Historic Preservation and an Assistant Professor in History for Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida. And the City of St. Augustine, with a number of partners, has just put together a plan with specific mitigation and adaptation strategies to help the most valuable properties that the city, the government of St. Augustine owns.
Hello, my name is Alex Westhoff, and I'm a Senior Preservation Planner with the San Francisco Planning Department. While preservation is about safeguarding the past, adaptation is about preparing for the future, and as professionals, we must reconcile these fundamental differences between such goals.
Angela Shadell. I'm a coastal engineer and the Director of Community Resilience at Taylor Engineering in Jacksonville, Florida. I think that the way the preservation community can lead here is we've spent years in preservation, protecting and saving our cultural resources. And I feel that it's really up to the preservation community to lead the charge in this. The community is so good at knowing what to protect and preserve and understanding the importance of this for future generations, that when it comes to flood mitigation, it's just another thing to adapt to. So it's studying the science and doing a science-based, data-driven approach to understanding what the threats are and how we can protect it against them. And I really think that the key is bringing together a community of scientists, engineers, architects, preservationists, planners, the public, and elected officials. So it really does take a village, a whole community to come together to prioritize what we need to do for flood adaptation.
Holly Backus, Preservation Planner, Local Hazard Mitigation Plan Coordinator for the town of Nantucket. Preservation can respond to the need to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts by addressing it from the top down. Federal agencies like the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation down to the state historic preservation offices. The Advisory Council and the state preservation offices can take more of a lead role in preservation planning instead of just outlining it as a concern in their respective preservation plans. If each SHPO outlined priorities for historic districts in each state, there would be more of a definitive guide for historic districts to prepare to mitigate and adapt to such things as sea level rise and climate change. Local districts appreciate the recent guidelines on flood adaptation by the National Park Service. This was a much needed start in this initiative, but more collaboration needs to be done. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Tymer Brown and I run the Preservation Division at Historic Annapolis. And the question is, how can preservation respond to the need to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts? And one way is through partnerships. Historic Annapolis is currently developing an adaptive reuse and stabilization plan for the property in partnership with the National Park Service Chesapeake Region, the city and the state, and Preservation Maryland. And the analysis identifies recommendations to make the building more resilient, including elevating the building approximately 5 feet to respond to short-term immediate risk, as well as long-term projections for sea level rise, but also keeping it in its historic location.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Rose and I am the coordinator of Acclimate Nantucket on Nantucket Island, Massachusetts. When looking at the question of how can preservation respond to the needs to mitigate and adapt in the face of climate change, preservation already has a lot of the resources and the frameworks available in order to do so. Emerging technologies help not only expedite documentation, but also can help us recognize when communities or resources are underserved or underrepresented in our data. This helps us make sure that we're serving that community and promoting climate justice and social equity in our work. Bring in interdisciplinary communications and communicate with fields that we may have not previously worked with or thought of as part of our documentation techniques and processes and adaptation processes. Preservation has always been about preserving for the tomorrow, but it's the actions we take today that make tomorrow possible. And we need to make sure that we are giving the communities the resources, the frameworks, the connections, the networks, whatever it needs in order to be successful and stay in place as long as possible in the face of climate change.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Bronin, a law professor from Connecticut and an advisor to the National Trust. How can preservation respond to climate change? I'm going to suggest two ways, both ways that involve the law, which maybe is my bias. One is to revise the Secretary of the Interior standards on historic properties. National standards are woefully inadequate to addressing climate change, and that we have to modify them, both to allow things like renewable energy and energy efficiency, and also to look forward by expanding them to include additional treatments. Treatments like a deconstruction treatment, which would enable us to deconstruct properties in a particular way and recognize that not everything can be saved. Another treatment like a relocation treatment, which would enable us to move properties when we know that we have to take them out of harm's way. Second thing I wanted to talk about was disaster law. So right now, disaster law does not adequately account for historic places. Disaster law does not incorporate historic places in the preparation or planning stage, in the mitigation stage, or in the recovery stage after a disaster has occurred. So those are my two ideas, and I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's as well. Thank you.